بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله يا رب العالمين، بارئ الخلائق أجمعين، باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين، وعليكم السلام، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأراضين بأبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين وصحبه المنتجبين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. قال الله العظيم في محكم كتابه: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم، وإذ يرفع إبراهيم القواعد من البيت وإسماعيل. Remember when the Prophet Abraham, with the assistance of his son Ismail, they were building the first house, the foundation of the house. Last night, we focused primarily on how to build the desired community. And I explained that if you look at the sermons, the speeches, and the slogans delivered by the Imam, particularly as he approached Kufa, Karbala, and Iraq, we see the tone and the context begins to change. I indicated that one message that came across often in the deliverance and the slogan was this notion of reform, that وَإِنَّمَا طَلَعْتُ وخرجت لطلب الإصلاح في أمة جدي رسول الله أريد أن آمر بالمعروف وأنهى عن المنكر. So the basis or the foundation for this uprising is a reform of the community, where he feels obligated, that has to stop encourage good and discourage bad or evil within the society. But primarily, talabul islah, reform of the society. We looked at a couple of the characters that Imam had and realized that on a personal as well as on a social, societal level, there was a fundamental shortcomings that we need to address. Last night I focused on, a few nights before, on the personal level, but last night I primarily focused on the societal level. What is the ideal? Let's call it the desire, not at this stage the ideal. Because the verse that I recited last night كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس. And I explained that those who are familiar with the Arabic literature, this is not for the past, it's for the future. That ultimately, because of divine message, that ideal society that everybody, philosophers as well as previous prophets, desired and worked hard to establish, ultimately the day will come when such a society will be established. But how much can we contribute in our time for the establishment of, call it, a micro desired community rather than the macro one? A micro desired community in our own time, where we become the reformers of our time. We looked at a number of factors. I indicated that if we put all the ahadith as well as verses in the Holy Quran, it becomes clear that the desired community that Islam intends to establish rests on the concept of Tawheed and Iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Repeatedly, Quran says that a society, ala bi dhikrillah tatma'innul qulub. A society, whether it is on a personal level or on a societal level, if God is not present, if God is not the foundation that shapes and forms the community, the society is not stable. Ala bi dhikrillah tatma'innul qulub. There is another verse in the Holy Quran that talks about those who literally remove God from their lives, uses a metaphor of a boat that is caught in a turbulent sea without an anchor that holds it down. They are being pushed left, right, and center. So what we need is a society that primarily rests on the concept of Tawheed, but in much more expansive way, not just on a verbal manner or on a theological way or on the belief issue. Tawheed has to manifest in every aspect and facets of our life. Without that, we are not going to be able to have the ideal or the desired community. There were a number of others. Once Iman and the faith or Allah becomes the central issue in the society, there are a number of factors which we call the secondary issues, which become the byproduct of this central issue that have to exist in the community. Number one, justice. If you look at ahadith that we have and a number of verses in the Holy Quran, the notion of justice in its, again, expansive form, not economic justice, but social justice, societal justice, personal justice, family justice, in every aspect of one's life, becomes critical. Number three, the unity that is needed within the community. A fractured society is not going to be the desired community. If you look at the history of Islam, the Holy Prophet migrates from Mecca to Medina to be able to establish the society which is called Ummah later on. The first thing that he does brings peace and within the warring communities that exist. If you go and read what is technically called the Constitution of Medina or the Contract of Medina, in which the Holy Prophet supervises the writing of a contract between the warring factions, Aus and Khazraj, and includes within it even the Jewish tribes of Medina, that they are prepared to be part of this pact. Fractured society is not going to be, fracture within a society is not going to be conducive to the stability that we want to be part of what we call ultimately the desired community. وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. That rope, metaphorical, rope or this string or whatever we want to call it that brings everyone together, stick to it. It depicts a society in which God becomes the central issue and the divine presence creates a centripetal force, attracts everything towards the center, towards Allah. وَاعْتَصِمُوا. So here, unity becomes critical. And the fourth condition was stability and peace and tranquility within the society. فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ الَّذِي أَطْعَمَهُم مِّن جُوعٍ وَآمَنَهُم مِّن خَوْفٍ. The economic stability is necessary, and peace and tranquility within the society is also necessary. كَادَ الْفَقْرُ أَن يَكُونَ كُفْرًا. Oh, Amir al-Mu'mineen, if I find faqr in its material and physical realities, trying to use a metaphor, I would have killed him. Because economic instability and faqr and deprivation within the society creates the right condition for disbelief to fester rather than belief and tawheed to become the main part of the community. So long as 1% of the community members have possessed 95% of the wealth, as we see it in a capitalist society, and then 99% of the community has to deal with the distribution of 5%, and 40% or 50% don't even possess anything, this is not a stable society that we should have. So the economic stability as well as peace and tranquility must go hand by hand. These were the foundational conditions. Then we talked about what kind of a strategy we should use to reach a society that contains these. Number one was education. An ignorant community, uneducated community is not going to be the ideal or the preferred or desired community. This is why right from the beginning of Islam, we see the Holy Prophet uses this policy of education. Battle of Badr. There are a number of prisoners of war that Islam has captured from Quraysh and Mecca. Medina has, some people say 8, some people say 9, some people say 10 or 15 people that technically can write and read. Gave option to the prisoners of war, you want to be released? Each one of you take 7 members of the Muslim community in Medina and teach them how to read and write. You can go. And a number of other hadith that emphasizes knowledge in the hand of a believer could be more beneficial to the human being rather than in the hand of non-believer. اطلبوا العلم ولو بالصين. طلب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم ومسلم. And it is a pitiful state that we are in today, that the knowledge has been taken by others. We have to run after them. So education is critical. Then we talked about family life. And I promised that tonight I'm going to focus on this. How do we create a desired family? We also said that a desired community must contain within it an element or a provision that fight corruption and injustice. And the verse in the Holy Quran is quite clear. وَالَّذِينَ يُحِبُّونَ أَن تَشِيعَ الْفَاحِشَةُ. Those who like and love to spread discontent in the middle of the believers, the curse of Allah is going to be on them. Why? Because strife creates disunity, destroys everything, and fundamentally destroys the trust that must exist within the community. The trust that must exist within the community for the stability to become critical. And also the economic foundation, as well as the right leadership. And I quickly at the end said, if you go to management textbook these days, they say any system has to provide two crucial components. Number one, an organizational model, whether you talk about Sony, whether you talk about banks, whether you talk about Lockheed Martin, or any organization must have a blueprint, but it also must have a dedicated managers that are fully understand exactly the blueprint and are dedicated to unpack it and deliver it. If imams are supposed to be the managers and Quran and the message of Allah to be the blueprint, yes, there is hope for society. But if you take the message of Quran, give it to people that really have no understanding whatsoever about the message, about the spirit of the message. This is why Imam Hussein makes it, puts forward these two conditions. Number one, the right leader is the one that his life embodies, exemplifies the Quran and the spirit of the law. And number two, cares, the pains this individual that he has for the people and the depravity within the people. So you need the conformity. The message says you cannot have economic injustice in a society if you want to have a desired community. If the leader is corrupt, and that's exactly what we had during the early history and after that, people, the leaders really cared less, and even up to today, cared less about the social structure and the poverty that exists. Even in this country, we have the same kind of problem. Wherever we go, we have these problems to deal with. But going back to the issue of family, which I did not elaborate on last night, if we go to the Holy Quran, we see repeatedly stories of different families being mentioned and elaborated. And normally, Quran uses, when it wants to express or explain a family, uses the word al or ahl, one of the two. إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت مما ترك آل موسى وآل عمران وآل هارون رحمة الله وبركاته عليكم أهل البيت إن الله اصطفى آدم ونوحا وآل إبراهيم وآل عمران على العالمين وحرمنا عليه المراضع من قبل فقالت هل أدلكم على أهل بيت يكفلونه. When the story of a family, repeatedly the stories of families are expanded or expounded and explained. In certain cases, because these families worked hard to deliver a unique message, there was a collaboration and cooperation between these families. When you read between the lines, you see them, the way Al Imran, Al Harun, Al Musa, Al Ibrahim, even the Prophet of Islam that we have in the story of Mubahala that we talked about, that happened nearly a week and a half or 2 weeks ago. فَمَنْ حَاجَّكَ فِيهِ مِنْ بَعْدَ مَا جَاءَكَ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ فَقُلْ تَعَالَوْا نَدْعُ أَبْنَاءَنَا وَأَبْنَاءَكُمْ, our sons, your sons, وَنِسَاءَنَا وَنِسَاءَكُمْ, our women and your women, وَأَنفُسَنَا وَأَنفُسَكُمْ, ourselves and yourselves. So here we see a unique family construct is being presented. Or the story of Kasa, when we read it, Allahumma inna ha'ula'i ahl bayti. Again, focus on Ahlul Bayt. Quran uses these stories to unpack the role that sometimes families can have, positive role that sometimes families can have in assisting the deliverance of a message. Occasionally we see, in some cases, identifies individuals that they did not work in collaboration with the message, but they went against it. وَضَرَبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا لِلَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا امْرَأَةَ نُوحٍ وَامْرَأَةَ لُوطٍ. These are two wives of the two prophets. فَكَانَتَا تَحْتَ عَبْدَيْن مِنْ عِبَادِنَا فَخَانَتَاهُمَا. They betrayed the message of their husbands. So families can become positive contribution, or they can produce positive contribution, or assist, collaborate, or they can stand, block the message. The question that we have is, what is it within these families that Quran uses as example? What are the characteristics that we have to imitate? Number one, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq salawatullah salam alayhi has a hadith that says, إن الله عز وجل خص رسله مكارم الأخلاق. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Almighty, has chosen the messengers, and they have a number of unique traits. فَامْتَحِنُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Understand these traits and try to see within yourself how many of these characters and traits exist within you. فَإِنْ كَانَتْ فِيكُمْ. If you possess any of them or all of them, فَاحْمَدُ اللَّهِ. Then thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for possessing them. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ ذَلِكَ مِنْ خَيْرٍ. It is a good blessing. وَإِنْ لَا تَكُنْ فَاسْأَلُوا اللَّهَ عَزَّ وَجَلَ. If you don't have it, then ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have few of them or all of them. What are they? فَذَكَرَ عَشَرَةً. 10 characteristics. Al-yaqeen, conviction. Al-qina'ah, contentment. Al-shukr, gratefulness. Al-hilm, forbearance. Husn al-khulq, good manners. Al-siqa, generosity. Al-ghira, this innate protective nature for our own community and our own family. Al-shuja'ah, courage. Al-muruwa, fairness within the society. These 10, Imam says, they are characteristics of the Prophet. See whether you possess any of them, all of them, or nothing at all. I mention this because when we move towards the family, we see immediately that without these characteristics, family balance not going to exist. Let's start with what are the primary responsibility of any family. The primary responsibility of any family is to navigate between faith on one side and the parameters of identity on another. On the one hand, we have to establish the boundaries of our own identity, but fundamentally we have to deal with what we call the faith, the principles of the faith. And in all cases, these two must be preserved. Anyone absent from the equation, family not going to exist. Depending on one's goal, if the goal is materialistic, then I don't think families would pay attention to the concept of belief or anything else. Technically, it starts with acculturation and then integration and ultimately subsumed in the outside culture. We live in a society that calls itself an open society or global society. And naturally, within this global society, there are elements that work as hard as possible, particularly for the faithful community, to undermine that concept of faith, because it considers itself secular. Faith does not believe, or belief in God or religion does not play in anything, and naturally it's going to be problematic for them to accept role of the religion or faith to have any role within the society. So there are challenges from schools to media to people themselves to social norms, etc., etc. So if we go to a community or society back home where we're from, Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, Syria, Palestine, Egypt, somewhere else, Pakistan, India, or Afghanistan, or Russia, wherever we come from, the fundamental problem that we need to deal with are those two original factors: faith and the cultural identity, the parameters of identity. Once we come here, because the force of the social structure is going to be opposing one or the other, what do we need to do? In addition to everything else, to the characteristics that Imam lays down, we really need to understand the social structure that we live in. Without understanding the social structure and how this social structure works to undermine the one value or the other, or to absorb anything else that comes in, is going to create a challenge when we try to establish what we call the desired family. Last night I mentioned that the education, when we talk about the education must be in conformity and must be supporting the fundamental faith and iman that we have. During the period that I lived in England, Dr. Karim Siddiqui, who was the head of Muslim Parliament, this is during the 1980s, did a research to find out the consequence of what we call secular education in the life of the children who come from faith families, particularly Muslim families. And the conclusion that they reached was painful. He said, for every 2 hours that your kids go to these public schools, for every hour, you need to spend 2 hours to brainwash them, to pacify the effect that your kids have picked up during just 6, 7, or 8 hours that they spend at school. We don't live in a society where the social structure is going to be complementary to the work of a family or the school. Far from it. Even if you work hard and enrich your children within the early part, they soon will be exposed to the force of the secular school as well as the societal one that does not believe in anything whatsoever. So understanding the force of the social structure is critical. For people, as I said, that don't care about this, that's their prerogative. But if you care about the faith, you really need to pay attention to the factors that exist outside. For the desired family, there are, again, similar to the desired community, general rule and ground rules and specific strategy. Number one, as far as ground rules, one mistake that we make is in selection of the partners. We tend to fall without thinking and then try to find an answer why things have gone wrong. The story of the wife of Nuh and wife of Prophet Lut is a classic example when the compatibility between the two partners are absent. There is a special word in the Islamic narrative, kufu, compatible. Without that compatibility, there is a fundamental problem and the causes for stability right from the beginning. If you don't pay attention, and we have a wealth of ahadith here when it comes to selection. It says the future of your children and your generation start before marriage, the search that you go through to select your future partner. Don't choose a flower or a rose that has grown in trash. This is the literal text of, or the saying of Imam Sadiq sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The rose that has grown in an environment that environment has fed the rose, that makes that rose appear rose, but in essence contradicts your own compatibility. Don't fall for it. Don't go for transient factors. Jamal, beauty, and so on, it's a transient one. What are you going to do 20 years later, 30 years later? Go for more permanent. Kamal, these are characteristics that elevates a person, that it's going to be there. Then a number of other factors. So contemporary is essential. To become compatible is essential. Then comes a number of ahadith that makes a list of various factors here. First, marriage and family has to be based on compassion and love. Without this playing a major role within the family is not going to work. And if you look at the verses in the Holy Quran, clearly states that the man and a woman that constitutes the nucleus of what we call a family, that ultimately the social structure is going to be made up or constructed by a number of these units put together. If it's not based on love and respect, and how can you, it says, لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا, the peace of mind with unity, how can it come if love and respect is absent? Two, there is a hadith that's from the Holy Prophet ﷺ when he comes as the arbiter between Imam Ali and Fatima az-Zahra ﷺ, in delegating the responsibility or distributing the responsibility and what one has to do within a family life. It says that yes, there might be some kind of division of responsibility, that one does one job, another person does another job, but shared responsibility towards everything is something that has to be given to both of them. Let's explain this a little bit further. In Islam, because we look at the family as a unit of social structure, that unity that was prerequisite in social structure has to exist within the unit, within the smaller unit of family. As long as husbands and wives or partners think in terms of I or me and her, or me and him, these are not the perfect unit that Islam wants to create a social structure. They still two individuals living side by side. They have not united. Once you start thinking in terms of we, then we are beginning to move into that direction. And occasionally we hear, when I have traveled around, this question was presented by both sisters and brothers. Is it my responsibility to cook inside the house or clean the house? Or is it his responsibility to cook and clean the house? When you analyze this, as long as I and him, or she or him exist, we really are not getting to the family step. When we start thinking about we, it's neither his or her responsibility. It's him and her, both of them. It's us. We have to think of us as a responsibility. Once we start thinking about us, then we see that everyone has a responsibility and a role to play, and we do it because we want the stability of the family to exist. A third that hadith talks about, and during Muharram, even the day of Ashura, we see this principle is being presented, is respect and for the wife's need. On the day of Ashura, Zuhair, one of the Sahaba or the disciple of Imam Hussein, wants to go to the battle. His young wife is staying there behind and crying. Right from there, she finds the separation painful. Imam tells Zuhair, it's better to go and listen to your wife and not to go to the battle, because ultimately it's your partner. Respect for the wife's, both partners. This is just example for the one party, but it applies to both sides. It's critical. So distribution of or delegation of responsibility, and also the concept of respect. And the hadith that's إن أهلك لا يطيب لها فراقك فلو رأيت أن تختار سرورها على البراز. If you choose making her happy than going to war. One of the factors that are missing or is missing within our own community, our relationship and family, is that we find it very strange to express our love for our partners. During the courting, we can smile, we can be bashful, we can feel ashamed, or we can feel shy, whatever it is. During the courting period was very easy to express your love and affection for the partner. Send flowers, send all kinds of presents. 6 years later, he or she becomes a spare tire in the house or in the life, only needed when we have a puncture. And then we complain, why is it that our marital life has fundamental problems? We gather here to commemorate Imam Hussein's Ashura. Look at the poetry of Imam Hussein regarding his wife Rubab. Long poems that he writes for his wife. One of them, لعمرك إنني لأحب دارا تكون بها سكينة والرباب أحبهما وأبذل جل مالي وليس للائم فيهم عتاب. It's just one point. I love a house in which Sakina and Rubab is in it. I love them. I love both of them. And I really don't care what my critiques say about my love for the family. Why do we go back to the Holy Prophet and see how he dealt with his daughter and his wife? We find it very difficult to express our love for the partner, which is so critical. We see Imam doing it in Ashura, other Imams doing it before and after, the Holy Prophet doing it. It's all to teach us. Remember, there are now probably a huge number of psychological reports and studies regarding the relationship. I advise the brothers and sisters here to read a book called Men Are From Mars and Women From Venus. A psychologist looks at the difference between the way the psyche of a man and the psyche of a woman works. And then go and read a number of ahadith and see how the same kind of concept is being presented. A woman cannot function if she does not have the security of your heart with her. And there is another hadith from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq that says, women are like flowers. You have to attend to them to be able to benefit from them. We simply assume they become just there. So the desired family has to have these functions within it, or these parts. And whether it is inside or outside, both, when it becomes we, both have a responsibility towards the future generations. And both to make a contribution equally. One of the critical issues that again we see in ahadith, what we call in these days conflict resolution. How to go about and deal with crisis when we have crisis within the family. Peacefully, rather than go physical or go mad and become violent. Peaceful conflict resolution within the family is critical. I remember many years ago when, again, in London, I worked with the Islamic Center over there and the family section, particularly for families or youth that married to non-Muslim convert in particular. But it was evident in other cultures as well. Within 6 months there was a problem. We did some research and find out two reasons. Number one, lack of understanding of what we call right and responsibilities within the family relationship. What is the right of the husband? What is the right of a wife? And what are the responsibilities of wives? And what are the responsibilities of husbands? And how do they balance themselves out? But the major critical issue, what unfortunately our youth were not able to deal with conflict without becoming violent. Unfortunately, the moment they became violent, threw things around, beat somebody up, or broke things. So we need to teach, to learn how to peacefully resolve conflicts within our life. Another issue that we see in ahadith, we go back to Allah fi nadm amrikum, having a clear goal and objectives, and organizing and planning, going back to the question that we had from the brother last night, planning in advance for the future. A family that has no plan is turbulent. A family that has a clear plan in how to deal with not only bringing up children, but in the future event, be it economical or in anything else, is going to be successful. These are some of the factors that we see reading between the lines and reading in books and so on with regard to the desired community or desired family. So putting everything together, Iman is critical. Respect is essential. Learning how to resolve conflict is important. Love and affection and respect for each other is a must, or are musts. And then we have other issues of the particular factors that deal with one family or another. Once we implement these in our community, then we can, these as a strategy, we can begin to develop units that we can call them the desired family. And once they come together, social structure or societal structure is nothing more than a number of these units cooperating or collaborating with each other. Tomorrow night, inshallah, I'm going to talk about how these families played major role within Ashura. These families that we call them the desired families played a major role within Ashura. Right from the moment that we start to the moment that we finish in few days, on the 10th of Ashura. It was the role of the families were extremely critical. On both sides. Those who supported their husbands to come and assist Imam Hussein, and those who supported their husbands to go to the other side. I was reminded at the beginning of the lecture about mentioning to the brothers, which I didn't want to say, I wasn't quite clear whether all the brothers are around. The brothers and the sisters that are primarily come for the English lectures. If the sisters find it difficult sitting in the new place, they can come to I believe there is a place behind here that the microphone is still working here to avoid the noise and the crowd that are becoming disturbing for them during this part of the lecture. So talk to your partners, to your wives and so on, and see if they prefer this. If not, then we may have to consider a different option, that during the English lecture, say put a sitar or something else where they sit here and listen and participate in the question and answer. But would you please speak to your families and see which one is preferable? The room in the back or this here is empty, and the loudspeakers are there, they can listen and hear. If that does the job, then we can use that. If not, then please let people here know on another option to be thought of. We have reached the end of the lecture for tonight and the time for question and answer. As usual, we allow at least 10 minutes until Samahat Shaikh comes in, and then we call it a night, inshallah. So, any questions? Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Is it about the question? Okay. Go ahead.
Could you comment on the following two things? In the Quran, الرجال قوامون على النساء, and then in رسالة الحقوق for Hazan al-Abidin, it says in the حق الرعية للنكاح, there's a part where it says وإن كان حقك عليها أغلب وطاعتك بها ألزم فيما أحببت وكرهت, and then you can some additional things, but those two.
عليكم السلام. You see, tafasirs as far as الرجال قوامون على النساء, عليكم السلام ورحمة الله, there are a huge number of exegetical commentary on it, which if you go and read them, there is a debate as exactly what it is. Let's leave for the time being the verse itself. If we go back to the creation, our interpretation is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created two individuals equal, a man and a woman. So equality is right from the beginning. That's one factor. لَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ gives a dignity again to both genders. And the concept of justice and love that we talked about, again, that applies to both. Once we consider these factors, interpreting qawwamun in a power differential in which man has the authority is a not right interpretation. It goes against the grain of all other principles that we have agreed upon as the foundation of the faith. Because on the one hand, there is ample evidence that says there is no power differential, there is equality as far as creation, dignity, responsibility, and everything else. What is the change, what happens, what change takes place, that suddenly a family relationship has to be built on a power differential when one is authoritative, one somehow superior, one is inferior. Once it doesn't make sense, then we have to go revisit al-rijalu qawwamuna ala an-nisa, as when it comes to consultation, ultimately it's the man that has to make a decision. But I even would challenge that as a generality of the law. because we still have man, woman. Once we talk about unity, it's the both that ultimately have to make a decision. So Qawwamun cannot be interpreted as power differential, in which man is superior and gives order and a woman or a wife should take order. We have to find out another alternative interpretation. The best tafsirs, التفسير الموضوعي في القرآن, that takes issues rather than a particular verse. One of the fundamental problems that we have with such tafsir, that they start from Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, until the end of Surah An-Nas, that they look at one verse at a time. Marhum Tabatabai actually looks at other verses that deals with the issue. But the more up-to-date tafasirs that exist, it rejects this notion of power differential. Has to go back to basic, and ultimately, even if it existed at a time in which, say, women were isolated, some people have claimed this. Women were isolated during the time of the Holy Prophet. They were not allowed to come out into society. They really not were aware of what was going on. This is why a man was given this right. What about now? Can we say 45% of the Muslim community has power over 50% of the rest? Because الرجال قوامون على النساء. We need to revisit the verse and find out, particularly when we contextualize it. I said for the time being, leave it out. Go back to the Genesis. Allah creates Adam, and from the same teen or from the same clay creates, contrary to the perception that Christianity has, from a broken rib and so on. From the Islam says it's from the same material we made his partner, which in essence what it says, they are equal, from the same material, the same process, the same thing. And all other issues that we have, or all the verses in the Holy Quran that talks about human dignity, human honor, and so on, gender-free, covers both male and female. Once you bring two individuals that's supposed to be equal together, suddenly a power differential takes place. Assalamu alaikum. A power differential takes place because they have come into what we call the holy matrimony. It's nonsensical. So those interpretations have to be left as personal opinions of few scholars. And then we go back and revisit and see, can we find out much more logical interpretations that fits and agrees with the foundational principles that we have in the same book, the Quran itself. And what was the second question? Could you elaborate on it? Yeah, it's, you have to understand, again, there are a number of, whether it is in Kitab al-Huquq or in Nahj al-Balagha, there are some words narrated from Imam regarding women in particular. These are historical and contextual. It's on that particular day referring to a particular woman, not put in a general rule, but not referred as a general law for the society. Respect for Prophet's wife, al-Mu'mineen Aisha. If he would have criticized Aisha, ultimately would have been an insult to the Prophet. So he uses this vague narrative of women. We don't see him treating Fatima az-Zahra that way, or any of his wives that came after. Even with regard to a critique of Imam Hussein regarding Rubab, he has a speech that says, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq says the same thing, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir says the same thing, that our women have rights in our family. Once these rights are given to them, they are free to do whatever they like with it. Not just financial. They are free individuals to decide, partners, they are not slaves. If you look at them as partners, we and think in terms of we both are responsible for this unit, small unit that we call it family. And this small unit cannot survive balance if there is differences of power between one individual and the other. We need to go back to these verses and deal with them. Since I'm getting close to 9:30 and Samahat Shaikh is going to deliver his lecture in a minute, if those of you who would like, we can go out and answer the questions outside. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.